What's going on, peoples? Hey, I know it's been a minute, so I'm just here to say what's up to the people. Y'all comment in and holla at your boy. I don't plan on being on here long, but you never know. Every time I say that, I'll be on here way longer than I thought I would. So, what is going on, fam? So, listen, I've been on vacation and having a good time. Me and my daughter went through freaking DC. Um, went through DC, went through New York City, had a bomb time up there and everything like that. And I have just been having a great time. I have no complaints whatsoever. Life has been good. So if y'all want to holla, come on up and holla at your boy and everything. So what's going on, RLG Fame? So I know I haven't made no videos in a minute and don't expect one for a minute. I have been really devoting my time and energy to my class. I got 160 people. We've been going through Discipleship 101 and really have been having a phenomenal time taking them through that. We've covered what it means to be a disciple. We've covered the gospel. Last week, we talked about spending time with God, an amazing lesson. Who is that? Shelly. What's going on, Shelly? So last week we covered, so last week we covered spending time with God, this week rather, and then last week it was assurance of salvation and being sure that you're right with God. So we've covered some little, what do you call it, controversial topics and stuff like that. So we've had a good time though. We've had a good time. So so y'all let me know where y'all from. Yesterday, I had an interesting conversation. What's up, Banku? What's up, ma'am? I had an interesting conversation on Facebook, of all places. All I said was that Michelle Obama was a classy woman, and then these Christian nationalists just came out of nowhere, claiming that she's a man and all this other good stuff. And you know what I did? I blocked every single one of them. I blocked about 30 people yesterday. So no, I don't even know you. So I blocked about 30 people yesterday. And more will come. More will come. So yeah, I'm just here. Yes, Shelley. They had to go. I think for any rational human being that gets on the internet and says that Michelle Obama is a man, you got to go. You can't be in my space. You cannot be in my space, and I'm not going to apologize about it whatsoever. So I stand against abortion and everything like that. But I don't have to agree with everybody in order to call them classy. I think there are some classy Republican women. I think there are some classy Democrat women. And Michelle Obama, despite what anybody may say or think, my personal opinion is I love the way she carries herself. I love the way she supports her husband. I love the way that she raises her kids. I love the way she carries herself, the way that she dresses, all that stuff. So, this is that past nonsense. Yes. Oh man, this content moderation is not playing. I mean, you ain't even say nothing, Shelly, and they moderated your comment. I don't even know where that came from. So yeah, I haven't done live apologetics since my conversation with Jasmine. Um, Man, that was maybe a month ago or so. I haven't done a live conversation since then. So if anybody's interested and has any questions or anything like that, feel free to jump up. If you have any issues with the scriptures or anything like that, then please let me know. I went to the Bible Museum, y'all, and the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C. was pretty amazing. I have some thoughts about it. Um, so if you come up, it will be Muslims. I don't know what you mean. What type do you want to attract? I'm not sure what you mean about that. But anyway, I went to the Bible Museum and I really had a good time there. So I forgot do I have my thing over here? No, the different floors. I spent a lot of my time on the fourth floor, which was how we got the Bible. And they do a really good job of taking you through all of the different Bible translations, manuscripts, different things like that, and showing how the Bible was compiled. I really thoroughly enjoyed that. That museum is in Washington, D.C. So listen, and if you ever, so it was really good. I'm gonna tell you about it. If you ever go into Washington, D.C., though, you got to check. I got to remind me to tell you about this food place that you can eat. It's in D.C., North Carolina, and in Dallas. It's called Kitchen and Cocktails with a K. And oh my God. So, hey, listen, that food was amazing. But anyway, back to the Bible Museum. Yeah, you probably do have to. You can get it all in one day, even if you're taking your time. But it was really good watching the way that they put it all together. My main gripe, Ty Deconstructed. I would love to have that conversation with you. Just give me 1 second to finish this. If you have time to stick around, and if you want to come up, you can. We can have a pleasant conversation. So does it show how we have the current canons from the Council of Nicaea? Let's show how we have the current canons from the council. Yes, Shelley, it did. So now the only issue that I had with the Bible Museum was they had a particular picture. I think I can make it my background, but all right, so give me 1 second when you come up, Ty. The only issue that I had with the Bible Museum is that they did not highlight the contributions of people from the African continent. So that was my major gripe with them, in that in all of this major section in this whole floor, they had exhibits and information from white Christians and white people that were contributed to the Bible, and respect to them. You know, any person that did that, I have respect for. A lot of people, we stand on the shoulders of great men and women. But to have a whole floor dedicated to the Bible and its compilation, its spread, its interpretation, its translation, but never mention the African continent and the people that came from the African continent that played a major part in that, that was offensive to me. And I'm going to send them an email with some really good information in it to you, because if you know anything about not just Black history, but biblical history, you cannot talk about biblical history for the first 300 years of the scriptures without talking about the contributions of Africans and people from the the continent of North Africa, or the North African part of that continent. So particularly the Catechetical School of Alexandria, interpretation began in Africa. Biblical interpretation began in Africa, in Alexandria. So how do you not mention Tertullian of Carthage? How do you not mention Augustine of Hippo? How do you not mention Cyprian of Carthage? How do you talk about the Council of Nicaea without talking about Athanasius, the Black Dwarf? How do you not talk about Bishop Alexander? How do you talk about all of these events, but you don't mention the African people who were central to its its progression and everything? So that was a little. I will not go so far as to say it was intentional, but yes, it was whitewashed. That was a little. It was not a little. It was more than disappointing. So I don't know if it was intentional. I think some of it may have been ignorance, but it still hurt. And they're gonna get a letter. They're gonna get an email. So anyway, Ty, what's going on, man?
Hey, how are you?
Thank you for being patient with me while I finish my little talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I saw you were looking for to have some conversations about and based around apologetics, and I asked this question the other day, and so I thought maybe it might be fun to have a conversation about why is Jesus so special?
Yeah. So you mean just in general, or is there something specific, it related to that you're asking? I don't want to just. I mean, I could go off on a tangent about that, of course.
Yeah. Well, first of all, full disclosure, I'm an atheist. I was a
Okay.
former Christian for about 20 plus years, spent about 15 years deconstructing, ended up deconverting. And in thinking about why Jesus is so special, knowing that there are other resurrection stories, there are other virgin stories, the fact that a lot of people in my comments are, Jesus is so he was sinless and he was blameless. I'm like, well, duh, he was God. So he doesn't get a pass for that. He literally could not sin. So it's not like he was this human person that had all these fleshly, he was God. He couldn't do it. And then in thinking about the other thing that they say was that he went to the cross and then he died. I'm like, I get that, but he was also still God, right? Because he was fully God and fully man.
Hmm.
So him being on a cross for a specific amount of time, he kind of got a cheat code, right? So what is so special about Jesus?
Okay. So first, you're kind of controlling this conversation because you came up, and I want to show you that respect. Would it be okay if I ask you just to kind of get a little bit background about you? I can dive directly into your question if you prefer,
Yeah, I
but
don't
I
mind.
would like to hear your story of what led you to deconstruct, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what led me to deconstruct it happened in about three phases. The first phase was I had some trauma when I was really, really young. Never blamed God, but I did blame myself. And so I spent a lot of years praying and asking God, heal me, fix me, show me, how to be better. Wasn't getting any answers to that. And when I looked around at the other women that I was in churches with, they were having the same kind of things where every Sunday people are up at the altar praying, same, and next Sunday back again, next Sunday back again. And so what I said was, there's got to be a better way. And so my first thing was to move out of church. And I said, okay, God, it's going to be you and me. Got all 5 of my Bibles, my Thompson chain and all that, and let's go for it. And my prayer at that point was, I want to know you for myself. That was my only prayer.
Okay.
And the more I started reading, the more I started having conflict with what I was discovering in the Bible. A few stories that I just could not let go of. I couldn't let go of the story of Job, and I couldn't let go of the story of David and how he dealt with his daughter Tamar's grape. 2 of the stories that kind of moved the needle for me. So then I said, well, okay, let's get rid of the Old Testament and just focus on Jesus. All right, I was trying to hang on. And so I actually went to a Why Jesus conference in Chicago. Like, that's how intent I was. But, coming back and taking a look at the historicity around Jesus, I couldn't make that stick. So none of the chips were lining up. Right. And I've said this over and over again. If the Bible, my determining question was this: is the Bible valid and real? If the Bible is valid, real, and credible, I will rock with it till the wheels fall off.
Okay.
But the more I started reading and learning, I couldn't find that credibility. I couldn't find the validity in the stories. And so I had to make a decision. And my decision was, it's not there.
What sources did you can you give me an example of something? Because I was taking notes. I don't want you to think
Yeah.
I'm doing something else. But when you
Okay.
talked about the historicity of Jesus not lining up, can you give me a little bit more information on what you mean by that?
Sure. So I started taking a look at what are the other historical references for Jesus? Who else wrote about him at that time? Where's the historical proof? If this was such a momentous occasion, if this was such a radical person who did all this and it was really powerful, where are the other historical accounts?
Did you find
And
any?
I found 2, less than 3 accounts. And then the other question I had with that was, well, no, he's all knowing. So he knows, right, how people are going to be. Right, we're kind of designed that way. What stopped him from writing his word when he was here with us in the flesh, if he was here?
What stopped him from writing his what? I'm sorry.
Writing his word to us. Why didn't he write his own
Okay.
story?
Gotcha.
Right? So he was here. Why didn't he write his story? Like, he knows men are fallible. He knows what's going to happen. So why didn't he write the story for us while he was here with us?
Gotcha. Okay. So there's a few things that I would like to start with as it pertains to the historicity of Jesus. And if you would like, I would be more than happy to send you some information on what I found, because there was a
Yeah.
couple of things that I would love to point out to you. When it comes to the historicity of Jesus, I know of at least 12 non-Christian sources that testify of Jesus's historical existence as a historical person. We haven't even entered into the conversation of whether he is God or not. But just the fact that Jesus Christ existed historically has been confirmed by people like Tacitus, who was a Roman historian, Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, the most famous Jewish historian, most famous Roman historian, the Emperor Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, Thales. I could go on, and these are all
Yeah.
non-Christian sources. And then of course, when we get to the historical sources, I think from the Christian side, of course, we have to remember that the Bible itself is not one book. It's a compilation of letters, epistles, and different things. And so you have multiple people in the scriptures. Even though we have one Bible, it's really a compilation of other historical sources. I would love to send you for free, of course. I wouldn't, the PDF of Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman is an atheistic agnostic scholar, a New Testament scholar who deconstructed. But he wrote an entire book on the historical evidence for Jesus. And in it, he testifies that Jesus Christ, of course, that other than Richard Carrier just being operating in intellectual honesty, Richard Carrier is the only scholar that does not believe that Jesus existed as a historical person. So when it comes to his historicity as a person, scholars are the unanimous scholarly consensus is that he existed. Are you familiar? How do you feel about, that information and everything that we just talked about there?
Yep, I'm familiar with the first three references that you mentioned, Pliny, Josephus, and Tacitus.
Hmm.
But there's no but in that. I'm familiar with those. However, I guess the same thing as but. It's the detail or the depth of those things, right? Like
Hmm.
Josephus, it's less than a paragraph, right? Like this, when you take a look at the volume of it, like the depth of it, if this was such a monumental person, where's the depth of it, right? To say that Jesus was somebody that performed these wondrous works, and I think I can't remember all of it. It was about a while ago since I looked at it, but where's the depth of it? And so I get that piece of it. So glad to take a look at that. I'm familiar with Ehrman, been to his site a few times. As far as the pieces of the gospel and the things that were written in there, to me that's still kind of suspect, because a lot of I think was it 3 out of 4 of the gospels were kind of like anonymous. Like we don't know if they were actually written by the people that they were assigned to, because they weren't signed. And then you've got a lot of copying. You've got a lot of things that were, one of the gospel, I think it was Mark, has a told verse or something that was added, or chapter that was added to it. So there's all these little pieces of it not being correct. And my question on my quit with the Bible is, if there is a God, and this is how he decided to communicate to us, wouldn't it be of the utmost importance to make sure that it was right?
Yeah, I think you make good. It's a great conversation. So when it comes to, the depth of this content, more was written. It's easy for us 2,000 years later to say, hey, more should have been written about Jesus if he was such a great figure. But when we actually look at the evidence, and I can send you a book where there's some evidence on that. Must be a man's name. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Frank Turek wrote about this. There's actually more written about Jesus than the emperors that existed during the time that Jesus existed. So when we're talking about a volume of work, we might think that it's more should have been written, but when we actually compare what was written to the people that were probably would be considered more important, like the Roman emperor, there's more written about Jesus than there was the Roman emperor. And then when you talk about the quotes, the paragraph quotes from Josephus and everything in there, Josephus also talks about another historical figure, which is Jesus's brother, James. And
Mm-hmm.
paleontologists, people that study, bones and different things, they have found the bone box, what they call an ossuary of James, and it's been confirmed by not Christian but secular paleontologists who study these things that this was or is the actual bone box of Jesus. So if Josephus is with referring to a historical figure, James, who he calls Jesus' brother, and we know that James existed because we have the box of his bones, then all of this is giving more evidence to the fact that Jesus actually existed, because we have archaeological, we have literary evidence, and again, from non-Christian sources. So I think when we look at the evidence itself, the evidence points to the fact that, one, a lot was written about Jesus. We also have to look at a lot of his followers were not the most well-educated people to be writing, and then writing books was expensive. I think so. It's kind of difficult for us to it feels like we're being a little anachronistic, and that we're reading expectations from our time now, 2,000 years later. We're reading them back into expectations that would not have been expected by people in the first century, because particularly during its first 300 years, and I'll land my plane here. During its first 300 years, of Christianity, the Christians were being persecuted. So a lot of documents were destroyed. A lot of, things like that happened. So, yeah, as my man Bully is there saying, papyrus cost an arm and a leg back then, which is why some people believe that the gospels were shorter than they probably could have been, just because of the cost that it took to make those materials. So would love to engage your thoughts on that. But I do think just looking at the evidence that we do have, it's actually overwhelming when we compare it to the other evidence for other historical figures from that time frame.
I can definitely respect that. However, we're also dealing with somebody that has the ability to create, feed over 5,000 people, out of magic, not out of magic, but out of, out of a miracle. And like I said, if this was really important to be communicated, where's the miracle of making sure that that word and that those stories were untouched and preserved and passed down to people if their lives depended on it?
So
Right. So
if I can,
yeah.
yeah, if I can, I think it's a miracle that we do have what we do have. We have over the evidence is that we have over 5,600 manuscripts of the New Testament, over 13,000 of the Old Testament. So when we talk about Christianity being persecuted by the Roman Empire for 300 years up until the time of Constantine, they were literally, if you look at any historical books, they'll talk about the burning of the sacred documents and people that died to make sure that they held on to documents, even the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff like that being buried. A lot of that stuff was due to persecution. So it is a miracle that we have what we do have, and that we have the hundreds and thousands of copies of the scriptures that we do have, particularly when for the first 300 years of the church, they were being severely persecuted just for being Christian. So I think it's a miracle that we do have what we do have.
But if he's an all powerful God, why was it not preserved?
That's what I'm saying. I think it is preserved. So if I can do a very short comparison, when you look at the manuscripts, a manuscript is a copy of the original document, right?
Yeah.
So the earliest copies we have are within, may say 100 years. We compare them, or if we had copies that were several hundred years older, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1948, they became some of the earliest copies that we have, closer to the original manuscripts than we had before. And when we compared the two of them, they were nearly identical, which demonstrated to us that all this while, the copies and the manuscripts that we had that were hundreds of years old were still well copied. And the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1948 actually confirmed that. And then people will say, oh, well, they're hundreds of years from the original manuscript. But when you look at other people like Plato, Aristotle, several others, their earliest copies are 1,000 years old. So when it comes to ancient documents, that we trust from Plato, Aristotle, I can look up a couple of other people that have charts on all of this stuff. The Bible is actually closer to its most original documents than any other document in antiquity, and it's not even close. So, from the time span, the number of copies that we have, the Bible exceeds those far and above any other ancient document from antiquity. And that, I think, itself is a miracle and due to God's providence and provision as well.
I'm not sold on that. Like I said, if you wanted if you wanted it preserved, then preserve it. But all of the different, and I get the manuscripts and the copies, and I mean that's with anything that we have. But isn't God, and I say Bible God because to me God is a title; it's not necessarily his proper name, right? But the God of the Bible, to make that clear. So he didn't. So it's just not enough for me. I just
Okay, so
honest,
let
it's
me
not.
give you some.
Yeah.
Let me give you some facts. I wish I could if I turn this around. Bear with me 1 second. I'm a TikTok. I'm not a regular on this, so I'm gonna see if I can turn off my background. Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to show you this chart so that not only you, but everyone else can see it, so I can kind of demonstrate some evidence of what I'm talking about here. And there's how I can turn my camera around. All right, good stuff. So here's some statistics. When we look at Caesars, you can see here there's a
Right.
1,000-year time span, but only 10 copies. Y'all can read the charts for yourself. But when
Yeah.
you look at the Bible, we're talking maybe 20, 30 years from its earliest copy, and we have 5,600 of the New Testament. So when we're talking about comparison, there really is no comparison to the Bible as compared to all of these documents over here. People will trust. We don't question their validity whatsoever at all. But somehow, even though the Bible is better attested, we have more copies, we have closer copies to the original manuscripts. Somehow that's questioned and seen as less credible than other documents. And I just think that that's unfair if we hold each other to the same standard.
Yeah, but why should we hold it to the same standard if it is from an all powerful, all knowing God? Like
So
those other documents don't have that behind them, right? They're man made. They weren't preserved by God. So it shouldn't. I don't think it should be held to the same standard. I think it should have a different standard if it's coming from an all powerful, all knowing God.
I agree with you. And that's why I say, because an all power, I think what we are looking at is the evidence that an all knowing and all powerful God was active in the preservation of these particular manuscripts. And I don't want to rehearse this,
Yeah.
You clearly are a very articulate person, but just the fact that we have more manuscripts, that we have, they're closer in time. all of that stuff. I think that is evidence of the hand of God in protecting those manuscripts. Because otherwise, they would have fallen into the same category as these other secular manuscripts. So the fact that it is God's word is part of the reason why we have more copies, closer copies, better attested copies than the rest of the documents from antiquity. So if we can circle back, I'm sorry, do you want to respond? This is a dialogue and I don't want to,
No. I mean, we're going to go, we're going to go in the circle there. So, I mean, I think we both said our piece there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
And so if we can look at historical evidence that says that Jesus existed as a historical person, and again, I'm not a big person on scholarly consensus, but the leading New Testament author, Bart Ehrman, wrote a whole book about the evidence of Jesus's existence. Then I think we have to ask the biggest question that matters, bigger than all of the accusations of contradictions and stuff like that in the scriptures. One, if Jesus existed and the evidence says that as a historical person that he did, and the same documents that testify that Jesus died and was crucified and was buried, all of these are attested by non-Christians, then what happened? Where is his body? His body didn't just disappear. We have to, I think we have to ask ourselves, how do we explain the empty tomb, number one? How do we explain the conversion of Paul? Paul was a very, very educated man who is not going to be convinced that Jesus Christ was resurrected just because someone told him. And he was a persecutor of the church. Jesus's own brother was an unbeliever prior to the resurrection. And then the disciples were cowards. They ran. Only two of them were even present at the crucifixion. So what other event would explain Paul's, change, Jesus's brothers change, the disciples, the change in their character, to where all of these people, with the exception of John, were martyred brutally for their faith? How do we explain, have you thought through, or, what research have you done on the empty tomb and the accusations, that the Bible speaks of that, if we say that Jesus Christ did exist?
Well, yeah, I've thought through some of that. I mean, how many tombs, how many burial places have they discovered from people who were unalive during that time?
I'm sorry, ask the question again. I want to make sure I heard you correctly.
How many tombs or burial or bones that were buried from people who were alive during that entire time have they found?
That I don't know. I think that's asking the wrong question. I think the question would be, how many tombs are empty from people who claimed that they were going to be, we have witness and evidence of their death, and then they just came up missing. I'm not aware of anybody else in antiquity. Particularly, I think it's just funny that the Roman, and we're being honest, the Roman Empire had every single reason to shut down Christianity for all of the issues that it was causing them. Their claims of monotheism went completely contrary to what the Roman Empire wanted, which was Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. So they preferred religions that were older, which is why they didn't have a problem with the Jews. They preferred religions that were old, and as long as you were keeping peace, the Romans didn't have any problem with you. But the Christians got on their nerves because it was a new religion and it was causing problems, because Jesus was saying, hey, I am king, which would, of course, it was a direct attack or affront against the Roman Empire. So if the Roman Empire wanted to shut down Christianity, they had every reason to do so. They had the power to do so, all by just producing a body. And everybody knew where Jesus was buried. It wasn't a secret. They knew whose tomb it was, Joseph of Arimathea. So, and then it was guarded by Roman centurions, which would have been like the equivalent of Navy SEALs. So we have to ask ourselves, why would Roman centurions lie or allow fishermen to come and steal the body? We have to ask ourselves, what happened to Jesus's body? And I think the reason that I'm a Christian is that through my investigation, the only thing that answers all of these questions would be that he was resurrected.
Well, if it wasn't, going back to if it was a big deal at the time, like we look at it and, we've seen the movies where they're, showing all these people around. It was this big deal and everybody knew about it. What if it wasn't that, right? If it wasn't a big deal, why would they care about the body? Like when you take a look at how Christianity developed, it wasn't like the day after or the days after it was like, oh yes, this is happening. Let's take a look at the timeline between when Christianity actually started forming and when they started becoming, or when they started being called Christians, because it wasn't exactly right after Jesus died. There was a gap in time to when Christianity started to take off. So if it wasn't that big of a deal, who would have cared? Now,
I
going back,
think I'm sorry.
but them going back and telling the story. So, from what I have read, the earliest written version of the Gospels was 40 to 70 years after the event
Hmm.
supposedly took place. So,
Hmm.
40 to 70 years after, could they have embellished the story to make it appear the way they wanted to?
That's a great
Absolutely.
That's a
So,
great question. So I think just to be clear, the earliest versions of the gospel did come a couple of decades after that, but that's not the earliest. That's not the earliest information that we have. So scholars like Gary Habermas and other people have looked at the Corinthians, the book of Corinth, or excuse me, the Paul's letter to the church at Corinth. James's letter was actually the first one written in the New Testament. So there was earlier information about Christianity that was written and was being passed around prior to the Gospels being written. And then we have to look at, again, we don't want to be anachronistic. This was not a written culture. This was not
right.
a culture of people that had ready access to produce books and materials and papyrus and different things like that. This was an oral culture. And
Exactly.
and Gary Habermas in his book has looked at the creed in 1 Corinthians 15 that he has dated, and several other scholars have. They call it the minimal facts, that over 80% of scholars have attested to the fact that this was written to within years of Jesus's resurrection. So there was already an oral tradition which would have been circulating around that was testifying of this. And then I land my plane because I'm going to make sure we're engaging in dialogue here. You're correct in saying that there was a progression of spread and growth of Christianity, but I think that lends more to the Christian case. If what would convince all of these people who know that embracing Christianity was not the popular thing at that point in time? To call yourself a Christian meant that you were going to be persecuted by the Roman Empire. And yet, despite all of the persecution, despite all of the martyrs that the Roman Empire produced, Christianity kept growing. So, what would cause hundreds to then thousands to then hundreds of thousands of people to continue to believe in a crucified Savior under the threat of 300 years of Christianity? The only thing that I could think of that would cause people to continuously place their faith in a crucified person was if they actually believed and had evidence that he was resurrected. I think that's the only thing that would convince people to continue to say that, yes, I'm a Christian, knowing that it could get you unalived by the Roman Empire for saying it.
They could have also just wanted freedom. And
But
they
that
wanted
wouldn't give
freedom.
them freedom. It would give them persecution.
Hear me out. Wait, hear me
My
out
fault. I'm
though.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
I mean, we had how many years of slavery did we have here with black people in slavery here?
Hmm.
And they wanted their freedom, and they fought and ran and tried what they could at the risk of being unalived. So if people want their freedom, if people are being oppressed, absolutely they're going to be willing to unalive for things that they believe in. And Christianity didn't just get spread because the ideas were so great and popular. That, the later history of how Christianity got spread was very violent and very brutal. So it wasn't just that, oh, we just love this Christ guy. There was some political motivation to wanting freedom from the empire that played into this as well.
So I think I want to get into that because becoming a Christian isn't going to get you that freedom. It's going to get you unalived. So I think what you're saying actually builds my case even stronger. The Jewish people at that time, Jews and Gentiles in the Roman Empire, were already slaves. They were already under colonization. So if you're already slave, now you're saying that being a Christian, that's not going to grant you freedom. It's going to ensure that you become persecuted by the Roman Empire. Who would sign up for that? I just don't understand. That doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Well, It does make sense to me if you think about what they were wanting. I mean, that's what the Jewish people wanted. That's why they were looking for this Messiah who was going to come and who was going to be their king and who was going to right them and pull them out from under the persecution that they were in.
Agreed.
Right. So
Agreed.
that was the whole reason that they were so against Jesus, was because he did not match some of the things, that requirements that they had. Right. So
Agreed.
they were looking for that. So now you want to take that same concept of people who are oppressed and feeling the pressure, and now we're going to spread it. We're going to make it available not just to the Jews, but now we're going to make it available to these other people as well who are tired of being oppressed. I would think that people would want to fight for that, even if it's not like, and it's not like I'm saved today and now I don't have this. It was a political piece, right? It was, we need to get this community together. It was very grassroots, and that's just one way of thinking about it and looking at it, right? But that's when you're saying, why would they do this? I think people do that when they are tired of being oppressed and they want freedom and they need a savior. They need somebody who's going to come and make things right on their behalf. And this was a way to get that, with all the promises that they kept giving, right, around Christianity. And when you sign up for it, and they were things that Jesus didn't even say, right?
So I think that's the crux of the argument, is that prior to Jesus's death, I could get with what you were saying. And I ain't gonna say I believe, there's documented evidence in the scriptures that says that you're right there, that prior to his crucifixion, people were really believing that he was going to become this revolutionary Messiah that they were thinking that was going to come and rescue them from Roman rule. But all of that ends the moment he's crucified. The hopes and dreams of people who believe that this Jewish Messiah was going to come and overthrow the Roman rule, it ends the moment he's crucified. So what reason would they continue to have to trust in a person that they just saw was crucified? The only reason that they would identify themselves with this crucified person who is an enemy to the Roman Empire, the only reason that I could see that they would identify themselves with him, continue to identify themselves with him, is if they actually believe that he was resurrected. Because we're not talking about belief that is just like belief in civil rights, belief in the voting rights and the different things that African Americans went through. We're talking about belief that a man was actually risen from the dead. You know, that's a huge claim. It's a huge claim. And I believe that even though they may not have been school educated people like we do, I think we can understand that. I don't think that sensible people are going to go around and that Christianity would grow from people just having a cognitive intellectual belief. That is not the definition of the word faith that is presented in the scriptures. The people that became Christians after what we, of course, believe the resurrection, they became convinced because of the evidence of the resurrection, not because of just belief in it, but because of the evidence, because of, as Paul talked about, the 500 people that saw him. These people saw Jesus. They saw him afterwards, and that's what convinced them to become Christians. I don't think otherwise, no person, even today, I don't think anyone would be convinced without evidence. And so I think we have to give them a little bit more courtesy and a little bit more respect than to believe that, you know, the idea of Christianity is what caused people to become Christians. No, I think it's the Christ, the resurrection of the Christ, that caused them to become Christians.
But that was still stories that was passed down to them, because how many of them do you think actually saw it?
Right. I think it was passed down. I'm sorry. My fault. Go ahead.
I mean, it's because before the crucifixion, the audience was primarily a Jewish audience.
Correct.
The disciples, they went to a whole different audience of people sharing this story. And, you know, that's where, you know, Paul and Peter, they get into their, you know, the whole things about, you know, Jews and Gentiles and that kind of stuff. But the audience changed drastically because the people that were Jewish were not buying it. So they had to take this to another audience. And that's what they kind of did. They went and found people who were not bought into this idea that Jesus wasn't the Messiah. And they took that and ran with it. I'm glad you mentioned the whole oral history, because I think about it this way. I mean, we have cameras on our phone. We see things on TV, and we still will argue that we didn't see what we saw. Right? Like,
that's a fact.
You know, so you know, back. add this to my story because my version is better. I mean, this is the art and tradition of oral storytelling. And so you have to give room for some things that may have been embellished, some things that may have been added, some things that may have been forgotten. And I give it that. And just, I wanted to say this too earlier. I think Jesus may have been a real person. I can rock with that.
Okay.
But it's the deity part of it for me and how he put all the story together. And so I get, you make a lot of really good, valid points, and some of the things I've thought about, some things I haven't thought about before. So I
Okay.
really appreciate and respect that. But when we're thinking about how stories get passed down and who the audiences are, I have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. And again, please, if you don't mind, I don't want you to say it to everybody, but if you would DM me, I would love to send you some stuff so that I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to go back and actually research and fact check the things that I've talked about, and different things like that, and then make up your mind from yourself. And if you would like to have continued conversation, I'm more than open to that. We can exchange information and continue to go on. But I think it's really interesting that I think just looking at a lot of people assume that the way that we play telephone was the way that this information was passed down. But when we actually look at the evidence, that's not what happened. These people that, we have the eyewitnesses, and then the people who talk to those eyewitnesses. And then we have to remember, there still is the greatest piece of evidence of all is the empty tomb. And then we could look at other archaeological evidence like the Nazareth inscription. The Nazareth, are you familiar with that before I start being redundant?
No.
Okay, so the Nazareth inscription is a piece of archaeological evidence from the emperor that existed at that particular time that made grave robbing a capital punishment. So something that would have been, considered a misdemeanor or so, or not even really taken seriously, right after the or the, what we believe, of course, is the resurrection, the emperor comes out and makes it a capital crime to remove people from the graves. That's a really big coincidence. And again, this is archaeological evidence that we have. So, when we start putting all of these things together, I'm not mad at a person who says, hey, I want to see the evidence of Christianity. But I will say, hey, look at the evidence. And when we look at the bone box of Jesus's brother, when we look at the empty tomb, Paul's conversion, James's conversion, and all of these other factors, I have not heard a credible story or a credible response to anything that answers all of these particular pieces of evidence. And so it's the evidence that convinced me. It's the evidence that continues to encourage me as a Christian. And I would love to, continue to share that with you and also hear out some of the other things that you have objections and questions about.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. I will check out a few of the things that you mentioned. I'm going to let somebody else come up and have the fun of having this
Well, I
conversation.
don't know nobody else that I want. It's a couple of people then. I'm going to let them up. But there was one other thing that if you got
Uh-huh.
time, I would love
Yeah.
to discuss with you. There was in the beginning, you talked about the different resurrection stories. So that's something that I've actually done some research on as well. There were other resuscitation stories, and I'm very familiar with the primary sources from them. Horus, Isis, who are these other figures in there? Because I got a whole PowerPoint on all this stuff. But Horus,
Odin,
yes, Mithras,
Quetzalcoatl from, I can't pronounce
yeah.
the word. Yeah,
So
there's a few other ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
when we actually look at the primary sources for these stories, people make it seem, particularly Mithras and Horus is a big one. They make it seem as if these are parallels, but when we actually dig into the actual primary sources from these stories, it's not even close. And every scholar that I've ever read has said that there was no concept of a resurrection in the ancient world. The only actual a resurrection of a person dying, then coming back to life as the same person, that concept does not exist in antiquity other than the story of Jesus. Even Horus, when he died, he comes back. He goes on to a different form and he goes to the underworld. So a lot of these stories, they're internet conspiracy theories of people who have not, and certainly this is not me accusing you, but other
Right.
people that I've run into, your Billy Carsons, your, people like this, those stories, when you actually look at the evidence, they're not credible. I actually did a whole teaching on Mithras, Zoroaster, Buddha, Krishna, Horus,
Right.
Osiris, all Attis, Dionysus, all of these supposed resurrection copycats that Christianity copy. They're the funniest stories. And matter of fact, I think it's Horus's that his his body was dismembered into 12 pieces, and the one piece that they came was his penis. And the woman sits on that and gets pregnant and gives birth to him, and it's like, that's not a virgin birth. So some of these stories, when you actually look into the claims, it's really laughable. Again, if there's any specific one that you're interested in, I'd love to kind of look into that stuff with you and just see
Yeah.
what we can come up with.
Well, you mean we call them laughable, but the reality of it is that the story in the Bible is kind of got some of that same kind of thing to it. Like it's all things that you have to suspend belief in order to make sense of, right? Suspending, the belief that that Mary was impregnated through the spirit. I mean, that's a laughable story depending on like what you believe in. But for any of those stories, you all have to suspend your belief in order to say, okay, this is real and this is true. And I say that out of respect for a lot of religions, because one of the things with Christianity that it does it to me, it's very dismissive of other religions. And I was sharing with somebody the other day because she told me that she was a Jehovah's Witness, and I said, when I was a diehard Christian, we used to laugh at the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? And they come around this, and we talked about how they did stuff. But when you take a look at some of the way Christianity is, it has some of those same kind of cultish behaviors. Like if you don't believe what we say, you're excommunicated. If you do this, if you don't believe what we do, you're going to perish and go to hell. So it's got some of those same things. So when we take a look at any of those stories, even the ones in the Bible, we have to, I think we give it that leeway and say, well, we have to suspend some of our belief if we're going to say that this is valid, period.
That's a fair point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Christianity is dismissive of other Christian. I don't think we should be insulting of other belief systems and religions and different things, but by very nature of Christianity, we are exclusive in that we believe that Jesus Christ is the only way, that he is the only God. But we should not be dismissive with the connotation of it being where we're laughing or making fun of or insulting other people, because even from our religion, all people are made in the image of God and deserving of respect, because God made them. So I do think you make a good point there. But feel free. I'm not asking you to drop from the panel. I do want to, respect the other people that got on. But if there's anything else that you want to discuss, I'm more than open to it.
Okay, thank you. I'll stay up for a little bit. I got a little bit more time, but I'll let somebody else chime in.
Okay, where are you from, Todd? If you don't mind me asking.
Born in Philly, but I live in Florida now.
Okay, good stuff. All right, good stuff. All right, good stuff. All right, who else we got here? For You to Live?
For You to Live.
For You to Live. Okay, what's going on, brother?
Hey, Chad, man, it's good to see you have a platform, brother. I've been listening to you and enjoying you in the backdrop. Again, I hope you will continue this platform. I think you're a very good orator, well studied, and that's needed, especially in these days where we are facing more, how you say, this intellectual type of society we're in. It requires us to be on top, what the scripture says. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman need not be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. Well, I think you're doing an excellent job, and I wish you would continue to address the question that's out there that people need someone as yourself to answer those questions. So again, I just wanted to say that, and just to land, not staying longer, but just to say this. If man cannot answer how everything begun, if man cannot give an answer to how things came into existence, then they have no choice to see that there's something greater, because it takes someone great to bring all this together. And so then, in that search, what comes closer to that reality of a God that exists? And one of the things that I refer to is the prophecy of the Old Testament, the history of Israel, the Persians, the history of Rome and the civilization and Nebuchadnezzar. All of these things are recorded, historic evidence. And then within those evidence, there are prophecy that foretold his coming way before he came into existence.
Yeah.
So,
and not just his coming, his name, his place of birth, all of that stuff is all part of prophecy, you know. So yeah, I agree with you. Very strong evidence.
exactly. And so if you're questioning Christianity, I always direct, so if that is the case and you believe no religion, then you have to answer, then how did everything come together so perfectly? For perfectly, you got to give an answer for that, for you to dismiss a God. So I think the fact that we, as you were saying, the evidence, and profoundly how you brought forth the evidence that points to that Christianity is founded on truth. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to say that, brother, and to encourage you to continue. Please
Appreciate that.
continue.
Oh yeah, appreciate that, man. I'm feeling refreshed. I've been on vacation, still on vacation, so I definitely will. But thank you for that encouragement. Ty, I'm not sure. From my understanding, all of the Gospels name Bethlehem as his place of birth. But if you see any evidence otherwise, I'd be more than happy to look at it. Minister of Information, my brother, or I believe it's my brother. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah. We are brothers, man. Hey, how everybody doing? Everybody good?
Good stuff, man. Where you from, bro?
I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia right now.
Okay, good stuff. I'll be there in September.
Oh, nice. I come check you out. But I've been sitting here listening to everything you guys are saying. I think it's definitely needed in the community. But I also kind of am a historian, and when I study the historicity, there's two different fashions. There's like Christian, and then there's Christianity, and then there's Christendom. And
Okay.
the Christendom part that I can't quite wrap my head around, dealing with whether it was the Crusades of Constantine or the different council meetings that seem to formulate Christianity as it exists today. For example, the First Nicene Council, if anybody want to study the different council meetings that created Christianity, because Christianity was a created construct by the Anglican Church of England. This is just history.
So
This is the
I would.
history of it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't mind you speaking a different view. But I've done incredible. I've taught an entire class on the Council of Nicaea. I have the primary documents from the people who attended the Council of Nicaea, like Eusebius of Caesarea, Bishop Alexander from not Carthage, Alexandria. So if you're going to say and make the argument that Christianity
Macedonia.
was created at the Council of Nicaea, I would ask you to produce some evidence for that, because I have loads of evidence that speaks otherwise. So you're more than welcome to present that view, but I would just ask you to back that up with some evidence, my brother.
Okay. So I feel like before I continue on my point is I want people to listen to one thing I tell you guys, and I on my podcast say the same thing. I'm not here to convince or persuade anybody. This is just information. I want you guys to go do your own research, and this becomes something you know, not something you heard. Please go research what I'm telling you. Don't believe me. I'm not here to convince or win souls at all. But the council meetings, again, with the Council of Nicaea, it creates something called the Homogeneous Creed, or the Nicene Creed. And this is what all Christian standards go by, which is God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, which initially comes out of ancient Egypt. Because this is what
So let me ask you a question. So let's just say I'm gonna feed into your argument. One of the things that I don't prefer for people to do, I want to be respectful. I don't prefer for people to do is when they say go do your own research. You said that you are a historian, so I would ask you, if you want to point people, if you believe that this is true, where would you tell people to go to research this evidence? Because like with Ty, I'm telling her, hey, I will give you historical documents, primary sources, because I know what I believe in and I have the evidence for it. So if you're free to do so. I love the interaction, but where would you send people to go to research this stuff if it's true?
Here's what I'm saying. I'm going to continue my point real quick and land my plan and give you guys citation, authors, and books to go look up for yourself. Again, I'm not here to belittle anybody's information, because I think that God gives us our own portion of understanding. This is my portion of understanding. Does not take
Okay.
away from what you believe in at all. I mean, what anybody believes in, this is information. But this is a time we all have to learn from everybody. I'm a master student. So I'll listen to you entirely for 15, 20 minutes, and you make all great points. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm not here to be an adversary. I'm here to add more value so our people can understand the whole history of it, the entirety of it, not just what you believe, but the entirety of it. So study the Council of Nicaea, study the different council meetings. Christianity is henotheistic. You guys never heard of henotheistic? Look up the word henotheistic. That's what
So rather than
Christianity
telling us
is.
to look it up, can you define it for us?
Henotheistic is the acknowledgement of other gods while worshiping one of those gods. Psalms 82:1.
Let's look up
Christianity,
Psalms 82:1 and
please
see what
do.
it says. Go ahead.
Please do. I'm actually on your computer. You can look it up. It'll tell you exactly what it says. The God that they believe in resides in the council of other gods. There's other gods in the council, but they only acknowledge one God. That's
So
henotheistic.
okay. So the gods that are talking about there, that Hebrew word there that you're talking about is the word Elohim. And the word Elohim can be referred to angelic beings. It can be referred to human rulers. It can be referred to magistrates. So hold on, my brother. This is matter of fact, rather than getting into an argument with you or back and forth, I'm gonna
No,
just
we're not
show
going
it.
to argue, but I feel like I
I
can't
know we're
finish
not.
my
Hold on.
point without you trying to tear down my point. We can get into the
I didn't.
etymology. I speak Hebrew. We can get into all the etymology.
So
This is
hold on, my
just the
brother.
surface level. I feel like you're trying to deconstruct what I'm saying
Of
as a
course, I'm trying to
disciple.
deconstruct what you're saying because
Well,
I'm a
let me
Christian.
finish. Let me finish my point. Then you can have the latter. This is not a debate. A
Okay.
debate would be I would say my point and you would argue the latter, just like a
Okay. Go ahead,
prosecutor
bro.
and defense attorney. So the history is the point of it. And what happens is throughout history of Christianity, things were changed and altered from different Bibles. If you not heard of these three texts, I'm gonna let it alone. If you never heard of the Geneva Bible, go research this information. Christianity was something that was created by the Anglican Church for the salvation of Europeans. And they
Okay.
know
So
that.
I'm gonna stop you there. So I don't mind anybody saying stuff, but we have repeatedly
That's
asked you. Hold on, my brother. And I am cutting you off on this one because I'm saying this, and this is for anybody on the panel. I don't mind you, but if you're going to make a claim, as a person who this is my platform, I have to insist that you back the claim up. And it's difficult. It's impossible for me to sit back and allow you to produce inaccurate information when I literally am looking at the sources that demonstrates that you're wrong. Now, if you can point me to a source that says, particularly, and I was holding you in high esteem when you come on here and say that you're a historian, you're talking about Christianity and Christendom. I'm rocking with you. Okay, great. Let's talk. But you have to be able to back up what you're saying.
okay.
And right
I
now, you
tell you
have
what
not.
then.
So I'm going to ask a
I
very
tell you
direct
what.
question. Do you
I
have
tell you
any
what.
evidence for what you're saying?
I have evidence, references, and citation. But as I'm finishing my point, you look up what I'm saying and tell me the contrary what I'm saying is incorrect. Since you're in front of a computer, look up what I'm saying and tell me what I'm saying and contrary is incorrect. Tell them what part is incorrect.
I just
No,
did.
no. Tell them which part of what I said is incorrect.
Okay. So in Psalms 82, I'm going to do this. Here we go. All right. So Psalms 82 is here. All right. So when it talks about God standeth in the
Read what it
congregation,
says to them. Don't
brother,
teach it.
I'm reading it.
Read it.
I was reading. And so please, all right, all I was doing was reading. God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. Now, let's look up this word gods here. It is the word, as I said, it is the word Elohim. And if we look up the word Elohim in a lexicon, you'll see here let me change this out. All right. So you can see
Elohim is a
here,
pluralization of El.
brother, and let me finish.
It's a
All right.
pluralization of El.
Elohim.
So,
I don't want to mute you, but if you keep talking while I'm trying to talk, I'm going to mute you. All right. It can be talking about rulers, judges, or divine ones, also angels and gods. So again, you have to look at the context to see what it's talking about. You can't just take the English word God without looking
all
into
I
its
said
original
was,
language. What
I
you
never
said was
said
that
God,
it
bro.
was
I said
okay.
henotheism. I
All right.
told them to look up henotheism is what I said.
deal with that. I have too much respect for the scriptures. If you can't back up what you're saying, my brother, I can't let you. There was just too much. So it's three things that you could say that's really going to get under my skin because I have studied them so meticulously. One is Constantine. If you bring up the name Constantine, please have some primary sources to back it up. Number two is the Council of Nicaea. I have done an entire 6-week class on the Council of Nicaea. I have the primary sources from the people that actually attended the Council of Nicaea. So if you bring up those two particular subjects, you're really going to have to contend with some actual evidence because I know what I'm talking about in there. And I can point you to actual scholarly resources, books, and primary sources for those particular events. Christianity was not invented at the Council of Nicaea. There I have historical quotes from figures 200 years before the Council of Nicaea. So the Council of Nicaea was to discuss Arius, who was an elder in Alexandria, Egypt. He was an elder there that began saying that Jesus Christ had not existed eternally. All right. So he began to put it into song. And then it began to cause a controversy. His Bishop Alexander of Alexandria, excommunicated Arius out of the church there in Alexandria. And so Constantine, because the Roman Empire was interested in one thing, that is Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. So Constantine assembled 320 plus bishops from all over the Roman Empire to come together at the Council of Nicaea, not to invent Christianity, but to put into written terms how we reconcile the fact that God the Father is God, God the Son is God, and God the Holy Spirit is God. How do we reconcile all three of these truths? So matter of fact, other than I'm going to do this and then if Tyre, if my other brother wants to come back up, I'm not going to ask you to take my word for it. I'm going to show you historical research. So because, again, people like that, they just irritate me. For you to live, go
A
ahead, bro.
host. Yes, I think it's important that you bring your evidence so the audience can know that he's without evidence.
Exactly.
You have, so present that so to show that you're not speaking from the top of your head, you're speaking with the evidence and showing it on the screen, and then offer them. I'll be happy to share the screen with you if you can bring your evidence. But
100.
Again, absolutely. Continue on. It was good.
Yeah, thank you, brother. So this here, you can see it's from a history website, not a Christian website. But it says the Council of Nicaea was an assembly of religious delegates arranged by Constantine in between May and August of 325 AD, which defined the Christian church doctrines and beliefs, particularly relating to the Holy Trinity and relationship between God and Jesus, and is still accepted today. Held in a region of then Roman province in the northwest of Asia Minor in the ancient city of Nicaea, now Turkey, it was the first council in the history of the Christian church that was intended to address the entire body of believers of the Christian faith. That's not it. Here's one from Britannica. All right, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Y'all can read it. I'll give everybody a second to kind of read there. But again, this was caused by Arianism. And what did I say? From Arius of Alexandria. Here is historical evidence that backs up what I'm saying. All right, so again, and then I got other information in here. But here's a quote. These are the only authentic sources for the Council of Nicaea. These are the people that were there. Eusebius and all of these other people on here. So if they're not quoting from one of these sources, one of these people, then they have not studied it. Anybody that tells you go do your own research has not done research. They have not done research. Because I care about people, I don't tell them, go do your own research. I give them research because I love Ty and I want to see her actually examine the evidence. I didn't tell her, go look this up. I offered to send her several books and sources that will point her to the evidence of it. That's what researchers do. That's what historians do. Okay? So coming up here and saying, go do your own research, that's not going to fly on my platform. It's not going to fly, particularly if you're going to be, saying something that goes against the mold. I have no problem. I just had having a great conversation with Ty and anybody else that wants to jump up. But telling people go do your own research, that's the first thing that indicates to me you ain't done no research. You ain't done no research. So, anybody else want to say anything? I feel like I had to get that off my chest. I'm
I,
sorry.
I appreciate how you handled that with such grace,
I
and
appreciate
patience, and I can and actually respect that. I did want to say something on something that For You to Live said about you know, if we can't explain how things were created, then we have to attribute it to God. And I might be paraphrasing a bit For You to Live. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but that's what I understood you to say. And I don't have all the answers to some things. And I believe that, scientists are going to figure some things out. I don't have any answers yet. And I've gotten really comfortable with saying that I don't know. But my question with that is, how do you know that God created anything? No one's seen him create a tree. And other than the creation story that's in the Bible, again, if the Bible is not credible and there's inconsistencies and errors, how much of a credible source is it to say that it was created by God when it just says he created, doesn't tell how he created, just says that he spoke it into existence? And to me, that's not enough proof. That's not enough evidence. And while I don't say I know how it was created, I'm not also willing to say I don't know, so it must be this God who created it.
One of the things that I appreciate your response, my sister. I think that's where healthy dialogue comes in, where we directly ask Christians, why do you believe? And I appreciate that as an honest question. And that's one of the things that Jesus was challenged, because they didn't believe that he was the Son of God. But he said to them, then believe the miracles. Now, the manifestation of power that was never seen in all humanity, the power that the healing and the deliverance and many other miracles that he accomplished. So the only evidence is our own personal experience with that same power that confirms our faith. Our walk is almost like when you see a tree move back and forth, and immediately you say, oh, that's the wind moving the tree, because it's not an earthquake, because you'd be moving back and forth too, but that is the wind moving the tree, but you don't see the wind. So all our relationship comes from the move of God, that when we petition him or ask of him, we see the results from our petition. Our own personal experience that affirms not just historically the history that leads up to him coming, but the fact that no one does have the answer to all or how all began. But the only thing we do have is the history, every civilization that came into being, and then the things that they uncovered. And there's so many evidence. And even as you address the question regarding the manuscripts, how can we trust it? But in all of its persecution, it yet is thrived through all of that. It supports it, because it was not popular in this Christian faith. So not just the fact that of his resurrection, but the manifestation and the power of God in their personal life, as Saul became Apostle Paul, is because of the manifestation and the power that was exhibited not only to him, but through him. And we have all that same testimony that established our faith. So I don't know if I adequately answered that, but I did the best I could. But great question.
I'm sorry, you want to respond to him before I cut in?
Yeah, and this is that last thing I'll say. Respectfully, that response is kind of what I feel like I was trained to give when I was a Christian, right? Like I don't know if you heard that when I was on earlier, but I was a Christian for over 20 plus years. When I was in college, I was intent on becoming a missionary and going to Kazakhstan. I became a teacher because in my thinking, I was a fashion design major, and I ended up becoming a teacher because I literally said, if people knew how to read, they would know the Bible better and they would know God. That was my literal thought. So when I'm talking to you about, from the place that I was in, just to give you that perspective. So I know what we've been taught to say and what we've been taught to think about it. For me, that just never, in where I am now, it doesn't change the fact that when you say that we've had these experiences, I've been in a Zen center. I've been in a couple of different other places, and I've had the same experience, even a more profound experience than I've had in a Christian church. So when people say that, oh, we know by our experience and by God answering our prayers, there are people that don't believe in God that get the same results in their life. So I'm always looking for, if this is real, it needs to be different than what we can have in other places. It needs to be different than what atheists can experience. If atheists can experience the same thing that a Christian experiences, how is Christianity different?
That's I really
So my
appreciate that time. I'm sorry for you to live, if you don't mind. I want to lay out. There apologetics can be done in experiences, but I agree. If I hear you correctly, Ty, what you're basically saying is our experiences are subjective. So what would give more authority to my experience versus Ty's experience versus for you to live's experience? Would that be an accurate kind of summary of what you were saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So rather than, and this is where I think, and I would say to my Christian audience and to my fellow Christians, I think we have to do better in our presentation of the gospel is not, and this is certainly not a knock against you for you to live, but I think we have to become more knowledgeable of the evidence. So this is what an argument that I want to lay out. When it comes to for you to live, laid out the existence or talked about the argument of the existence of the universe. Where did the earth come from? So let's start with this. Here is Dr. Stephen Hawking, the most famous atheist in the world. All right, where he was, but until he passed. All right. So in this quote that you can see here, and I've given you the source, he has admitted that the evidence, the scientific evidence, science is a search for causes, and its scientific evidence has determined that the world had a beginning. The universe has not existed eternally. All right. So we're just laying out an atheist argument and one of, if not the most educated and famous atheist in the world. So the universe had a beginning. All right. So here is an agnostic astronomer. All right. And you can see here he talks about the evidence of the origin of the world, that it came to a beginning. And did he say? I'm just, you can read the quote yourself. I don't want to belittle the audience. And then I want to show one more. And if anybody wants these particular slides, not the whole slide deck, because I do, this is my business. But so, of course, the argument here is that the Big Bang is the beginning. If the universe had a beginning, then if the universe had a beginning, then we will make the argument that it had a beginning at the Big Bang. All right. So here's a couple of arguments that I want to lay out. So anything according to, let me turn this back around. All right, so I'm gonna just give, I got about 7, but for the sake of time, matter demands a maker. All right, so the law of cause and effect says that anything that comes into existence has to have a cause. All right, so the universe is a material effect that according to science had a beginning. Science teaches us that time, space, and matter has to come into existence at the same time. Because if you have time and space but no matter, what are you putting? If you have matter and space but no time, when are you putting it? If you have matter and time but no space, where are you putting it? So that's called a continuum. Time, space, and matter have to come into existence at the same time. The Bible answers that in the first 10 words. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heavens and the earth. That's time, space, and matter all coming into existence at the same time. So we have to answer the question, what other, again, in the chain of cause and effect, there has to be a first cause. And science has not even attempted to come up with any other first cause other than what Christians believe is God. And as Ty admitted, and I give you credit for that, the scientific answer right now is they don't know, but it doesn't mean that it's God. Okay, so that's just one. Matter demands a maker. Number 2, life demands a life giver. All right, a scientific explanation or a material explanation for the world does not explain how human beings were given life. You cannot give what you do not have. Okay, so evolution cannot give life because evolution does not have power. Evolution does not have intellect. Evolution does not think. It does not, do all of those things. So life, whoever or whatever gave human beings life has to have life in itself in order for it to give life. All right. And then my last argument, and I'll land my plane with this, is design demands a designer. If I tell you to look up at a mountain structure just full of mountains and rock, that's not going to tell you much. Someone put it there. It came from somewhere. It only tells us so much. But if I look into that rock structure and I see Mount Rushmore, that's telling me a completely different story. Somebody with intellect, somebody with power, someone with a design in mind had to have created Mount Rushmore. If I see a pile of bricks, that pile of bricks doesn't tell me much. But a brick house tells me a whole lot more. When we look at the world, we don't see a pile of bricks. When we look at the world, we don't see a mountain structure. We see Mount Rushmore. We see a brick house. We see design in the world, which tells us that a designer had to put the world into existence. And I lied. I'm gonna give you all the last one. And that is intelligence demands an intelligent creator. Because human beings have intelligence, it had to come from someone or something that has intelligence. So again, wrapping all of this up, whatever or whoever is responsible for human beings, for life, for the existence of the world, has to be powerful, had to have intellect, it had to have life, it had to be personal because it's making the choice to do all of these things. And again, all of that evidence, that doesn't point to evolution. Evolution is only concerned with one thing, and that is the existence or the continued existence of a species. Evolution does not care about right and wrong. It only cares about the continual existence of a species. So when you look at all of these things, the argument of design, the argument of intellect, the argument of life, the argument of matter, I believe that the only thing that answers all of these questions is a personal, powerful, intellectual, life-giving deity that Christians would call God. So again, that's my argument, for believing in God, as opposed to just, I believe because he lives in me, because I know him for myself. I think those are okay arguments, but I just think from a scientific perspective, I think we have evidence that we need to look at.
And I agree with 95% of that.
Okay, so we getting somewhere.
Here's my, and this is what I've said, and this is why I consider myself a spiritual atheist, right? I believe there is something bigger than all of us. I just don't believe it's a man-made deity. And that's why I don't believe in any of the deities. I think they're all man-made. And I just wrote this the other day. I said, there's not a single religion where the deity has written their word themselves. Every single deity, every single word that we have has always had a third party, a man or a human that has touched it. And so that's where so yeah, I agree. The way things are designed, and there's something I can't deny, the connection that I feel when I work with my clients, and we both have this energy that's between us. I can't deny that. I'm just not willing to attribute it to the God of the Bible, because of the stories that I've read and because of the experiences that I've had. And I get that that's my totally bias, but I own every bit of that.
No doubt.
All right. I know that. So that's it. But thank you. This has been such a great conversation. I really respect you. I really had a good time.
Yeah,
appreciate you.
Please don't forget to DM me your email address so I can send you those resources for you to look at. And I'll include my phone number and my email. So if you choose to reach out, by all means, the door is open. All right. So I got to roll, y'all, and everything, man. I got to do this more often. This was an incredible amount of fun, and everything. I'm going to download this, and I will put it on my YouTube channel, and Frontline Faith. I will give you an opportunity to speak. I don't want to invite you up on the panel and not give you an opportunity to say nothing. But my YouTube channel, you can connect to it through my bio. It's updated. I teach classes every Tuesday. I'm doing a class right now on Discipleship 101, walking people through the basics of the faith. So we've been doing that for 5 weeks now. We'll go to 7 weeks. So if you're interested in taking that class or future classes with us and everything like that, by all means, you're more than welcome to do that, or just stay tuned to the channel, and everything. I love to teach. I love to listen. I love to have productive conversations and different things like that. So, and I think Ty is exactly the type of person I love to dialogue with. She's open. open, great conversation. It was respectful the entire time. And I love a person that says, show me the evidence. And so, we'll be praying that she will take a look at it. And seeds were planted, Jamel. So, I appreciate y'all rocking with us for this bit of time. Frontline, please, man, you got the floor. Please forgive me for, having you wait so long to say anything.
It's all good, man. Every time I do come up or whatever, it's a lot going on, or you're about to leave, but it's all good. I caught you this time. So two things or whatever. I saw you was talking about the scientific part. You talked about the time, the space, the matter. So what about the force and the motion? Would the force be the Spirit of God, and would the motion be just like it says in verse 2? It says. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God, which is the force, moved upon the face of the water. Would that be the force and the motion?
So great question. From a biblical perspective, we would not say that the Holy Spirit is a force. We believe that the Holy Spirit is a divine person, and everything. So wouldn't call him a force. But yes, it is the Spirit of God that did these things. Now, I want to be a blessing to you, if you don't mind. If you send me your email address, I want to send you this book. It's called The Lost World of Genesis 1. It's by scholar John Walton. I'm actually reading it right now. I got like 2 or 3 chapters left. But he makes the compelling argument that Genesis 1 is not describing material. Okay, my bad. I got a phone call. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
He makes the argument, a compelling argument with evidence, that Genesis 1 is describing a functional creation, not a material creation. So when it says in the beginning, it's describing the beginning of God's creative work, not just describing the beginning of time itself. So it's an incredible book that is really enlightening. That, and I think the biggest issue that we have as people when reading the scriptures is we're not the original audience. So when Genesis 1 through 11 was written, it was not written to Christians in the 21st century in the United States of America. It was written to a completely different people in a different culture who would not have been looking for or even understood scientific creation if that's what was being described. For instance, the sun was created on day 4, but light is created on day 1. How do we get light without the sun? We have to explain that if we believe that Genesis 1 is describing material creation. But if we're describing functional creation, and I'm sorry, I should have defined that. Functional creation would be like the difference of, if I take this computer that's in front of me, when it's created, that doesn't mean anything. When it's functionally created is when a person is actually there, it's actually doing what it was designed to do. So John Walton makes the argument that Genesis 1 is talking about the functional creation of the earth and preparing it for mankind to live in it and let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, to exercise dominion over the earth. So if you don't mind, I'd love to send you that book, for free, of course. And it goes into greater detail than I can.
Okay, not a problem. Appreciate that. And my second thing too. So you pulled up so I've been looking for, I guess, a good Greek program to break down certain words. Like, say for instance, yesterday I had a conversation with some Jehovah's Witnesses, and they kind of hang on the word of Godhead. They say the Godhead is not in the original text, this, that, or the other. It actually means divine nature or whatever. And so I'm looking for a program where I can actually go and break these different things down and get the understanding. But you pulled a program up on your screen. What was that?
Yeah, I'm finna tell you. So people in the chat keep asking again. The book was called The Lost World of Genesis 1, all right, by John Walton. This program is called eSword. It's free. Free, free. All right. I love it because all of these now, some of these, the overwhelming, matter of fact, I can pull it up and let you look at it. The overwhelming majority of these Bibles are free in there, but there are some that you have to pay for. So here's an example. You'll see these ones. All of these particular Bible versions are free, the ones that I've installed here. And then these ones here, the premium ones, you have to pay for those. Okay. So, but there's still a lot of Bible translations in there. All of these commentaries you can get are free. And there's some really good commentaries in there. So you got there's your lexicons that you were talking about. All of these lexicons and Bible dictionaries in here are free. All right. And then you still have the premium ones down there. So eSword is always my number one recommendation to people who are looking for a Bible software and don't want to spend a lot of money. Now, if you are a serious Bible student or you have some money you want to spend, the gold standard for Bible software is Logos or Logos. So you're going to pay some money for that, but you get what you pay for. Logos, I don't even want to start. The features in that is just absolutely amazing. But start with eSword, get used to it, and you do that. If you want to invest in Logos, let me know. I know the national presenter for Logos. He'll hook you up with a good discount. Send a brother DM.
That's what's up, man. You know what's so crazy? Because I had eSword sitting on my phone the whole time. You know how you download certain things or whatever, you just don't use it?
Yeah.
It's sitting on my phone right now, and I'm just like, okay, it's been here this whole time. But yes, sir, I appreciate you for showing me that. That would actually help me in my studies too as well. You know what I'm saying? For myself, first of all, and then whatever I learn, I usually share with somebody else if it comes up. But I appreciate you though. Thank you.
Yeah, send me a DM with your email, and I'll send you a copy of that book. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right, y'all. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Logos does have a free version, but it ain't got the sauce to it. You know what I'm saying? It ain't got the sauce in it. But yeah, check out Logos. It does have a free version that is still good and everything. But whatever you do, invest in your spiritual education, invest in your spiritual growth. I spend money on Jordans. I ain't gonna speak for y'all. I spend money on stuff that I want. I spend money on stuff that I value, and I value my biblical education, my growth, and different things like that. So I invest money, and I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on Bible software books. Y'all have seen my bookcases and stuff like that. I invest in stuff that's important to me. Anyway, I enjoy doing this, man. I got to do this more often, and everything. Matter of fact, I may be back tonight once I drop my daughter off and everything. So we'll see. But in the meantime, y'all check out my hit my bio. You can connect with me. Check out my website. All of these PowerPoints and stuff that I was pointing at, they're available on my website, www.greaterworksdiscipleship.com. Again, www.greaterworksdiscipleship.com, or just click the link in my bio. Check it out on there. We got classes. We got all kind of stuff going on. If you're interested in any of that, let me know. And as always, y'all just stay tuned to the channel for great content. And with that said, I will catch y'all later. I love y'all so much. Blessings.